Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Success Connection workshop on Study Skills for Success. My name is Scott Sutherland, and I am the Capico coordinator here at Windward Community College. And in my position, I oversee various academic support services, which include tutoring, supplemental instruction, student tech support, and then assisting Tasha with coordinating the Success Connection workshop series as well. So this workshop is a part of that series, which is a collaboration between all of the UHCC campuses. Success Connection workshops actually began at Leeward CC, and since 2021 have expanded to offer workshops to the whole UH system. And so we're really excited that you've joined us today. And we'll be sharing a link for future Success Connection workshops throughout the presentation as well as at the end. So let's go ahead and get started today. So some quick reminders before we get started. For this presentation, we'd love to know who our audience is today. So we'd appreciate if you turned on your camera if you feel comfortable. Of course, ultimately, it's up to you to decide. We'd also love to hear your questions. So feel free to put your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll be sure to respond. We'll also have some time at the end of our presentation for Q&A if you'd like to wait until then. As I previously mentioned,
No, I'm fine. I just took a long time.
As I previously mentioned, we'll be recording this session for future use so that others can benefit from these Success Connection workshops. And finally, if your instructor is providing you with extra credit for your attendance today at this workshop, please be sure to complete the feedback form at the end and indicate who your instructor is so that we can contact them and let them know that you attended. I will also be sharing my study skills guide at the end of the presentation that summarizes everything I talk about today. And so I will send that to you if you complete our feedback form at the very end. Let's see. I think that's it for that. So here's our agenda for today's presentation. We'll start off with some really brief introductions to learn a little bit about you. And then next, we'll describe the study cycle, which is an effective and ideal way to study based on research. Then we'll talk about study preparation, which includes your study environment, creating a study plan, and setting goals for your study. And finally, we'll talk about two highly effective study strategies, which are distributed practice and active recall. So let's get started with our introductions. So I'll start first. Again, my name is Scott Sutherland, and I am the Capico coordinator here at WCC. And now I'll have Madison introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Madison. I'm one of the Capico mentors here at WCC, but my home campus is Manoa, and I'm majoring in psychology. One thing I do to study is when I take all my notes during class, it's a huge mess. So I always go back and organize it afterwards.
Nice. That's a great strategy. So I know we don't have a ton of time. So instead of having each of you introduce yourselves, we'd like you to put the following information into the chat box, if you wouldn't mind. So if you wouldn't mind telling us your first name, your home campus, your major, and then one thing you currently do to study. So it could be anything that you're currently practicing in your study for your current classes. So let's see who's with us today. And then actually, while you're typing, I am going to continue previewing what we'll be covering today. So this is my overall overarching message for today, which is that effective studying equals the study cycle, which we'll go over, plus effective study preparation, plus the two skills that we mentioned, which are active recall and distributed practice. So we're going to take a deeper dive into each of these in a little bit. Hi, welcome, Sam. See you in the chat box. UH Maui, majoring in electronic and computer engineering technology. Excellent. Welcome. And hi, Hannah. Working at WCC, studied political science. And something Hannah does to study is to take scheduled breaks to help stay focused on on the time working, which is another excellent strategy that we will go through in a little bit as well. And welcome Ivalani, WCC, Hawaiian Studies, the Pomodoro method. Excellent. That's another tip we'll go over in today's session. Thank you. Thanks everyone for sharing. It's great to learn a little bit more about you. So, like I said, let's take a deeper dive into each of these pieces. So first, the study cycle. And for this, I'm going to have Madison jump in.
Okay, so there's 5 steps in the learning cycle. So first, previewing material before class, attending, reviewing, studying, and then assessing yourself. And then so it's better to learn as the course progresses rather than like trying to cram everything right before the exam. Yeah. Oh, and then we also have another introduction in the chat. So hello, Patrice, a Windward CC student in Hawaiian Studies and continuing education to be an ESL instructor. Oh, awesome. And then setting a calendar with tasks each day. That's also a great strategy.
Excellent. Yeah, so we'll go through each of these 5 stages of the study cycle to give you a clearer idea of what we mean by each of these pieces. And then what Madison was mentioning about learning as the course progresses, rather than memorizing information right before a quiz or exam, what we know from lots of research is that cramming is not the most ideal way to study, and instead we should be distributing our study over an extended period of time. So. All right. So really quickly, we want to engage with you and ask you which part of the study cycle do you regularly perform and which ones do you skip? So actually, for this first part, we're just going to talk about the ones that you are currently performing. So go ahead and either scan our QR code or join us at slido.com and you can enter in the number 8010570. And thanks, Madison, for putting that into the chat box. So go ahead and try and connect with us. And then we're going to ask you to answer this question. Which parts of the study cycle do you regularly perform? And you may be seeing already some results on your screen. This is because I'm compiling all of the results from these polls into one thing so I can get a good idea of what students are currently doing and not doing as a part of their own study regimen. So currently you can see the results and you can see them changing on the screen that, you know, most students are attending, which is important. Attending class is extremely important. And as well, most students are also studying. However, what we notice when we look at this poll across multiple semesters of conducting this presentation is that students tend to do the other 3 pieces a lot less. So reviewing course material after they've learned it, previewing course material before class, and then the part that the least amount of students do is to assess whether their own study strategies are working and to make adjustments from there. So thank you for participating in our poll. It looks like the results have shifted a little bit, but the order is still the same. So that's great. That helps us a lot.
Hey, thank you all for completing that poll. So a little bit more in depth about each of those 5 steps. So first, previewing before class. So yeah, the study cycle begins even before you go to class. So it's good to like read your textbooks or look at your PowerPoints before going to class. That way the material is already a little bit familiar to you. And you can kind of get a sense of the big picture of what's going to be talked about during class and maybe even come up with some thoughtful questions to ask. So some sample activities are like skimming your readings, looking at like the headings, what vocabulary words there are, or what discussion questions are posed. And then again, review your instructor slideshows, your PowerPoints, and then write down any questions you have. Okay, and then second is actually attending class, which we saw that most of you or all of you do attend class, which is great. So yeah, attending class regularly is a very important part of the study cycle. And then not only just attending, but also participating. So listening actively, taking notes, and asking questions during class. And then during class, it's also great to practice good note-taking skills. So this will help you focus on the material, and having a good structure to your notes can help you refer back to them later. And so these class notes are also your study materials for later. So think about the format, maybe which mode is better for you. Do you prefer handwritten or digital notes? And each of them has pros and cons. So handwriting your notes might help you remember information more when you get that kinesthetic movement in, or digital notes might be easier for you to organize if you have a lot of different notes. And then also consider Cornell note taking. So this, or outlining, concept mapping, things like those. So yeah, we'll take a look at Cornell notes or put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I went ahead and put a link in the chat for Cornell note taking. One thing I want to mention here about note taking as well is that a lot of it has to do with your preference and what works for you. So Madison was mentioning, handwritten versus digital notes. Some may prefer one over the other. For instance, I am more prone to taking digital notes because I can type way faster than I can write. And then as Maddie mentioned, there's the added benefit of being able to revise my notes after a lot more easily than if I had taken handwritten notes. However, we know from research that handwriting can help you remember information better. So again, pros and cons for each. Okay, so right now I'm going to show you just a very short 1-minute video about Cornell note taking, just to give you an overview of what that process is. Let me know if you have any issues with the sound.
The Cornell note-taking system was made popular by Walter Pauck, an education professor at Cornell University. Cornell notes are helpful in class, while reading textbooks, and when using online resources. Start by labeling your page, then divide it into 3 sections: notes, cues, and summary. No matter where you're using them, the basic idea behind Cornell notes is that you have a place to write down facts, write down questions, and summarize what you've learned. The Cornell Notes format allows your brain to work in several different ways, so it can help you understand and retain information. The format is more flexible than you might think. Try out different aspects of this system and see what works for you.
All right, so that was a really quick overview just to show you what that format looks like. It is one really effective way of taking notes, but it's not the only way. So again, take a look at what works for you, explore Cornell note taking, but also look at other formats that might be beneficial to you.
Yeah, and then so our third step in the study cycle is reviewing after class. So revisit your notes really soon after class, like within that day, preferably right after class. So reread, reorganize your notes, fill in any gaps you might have missed, or any questions that you thought of. So this will really give you that chance to make sure you can read your notes. I have really messy handwriting. Make sure it's all organized in the correct order and that it makes sense so that you can go back to it when it's no longer fresh in your memory. And then this will also give you that extra review that will help move it from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. So that repetition is really important in looking at your notes. And this can be a really quick step, as much as just 10 minutes if you do it correctly and efficiently, like being free from distractions, if you're really focused and intentional in your review, and if you're very engaged with the material. Okay, and then step 4, studying the material, which we saw that a lot of you do study your material. So plan and schedule your study time. So you should decide when you're going to study and space it out over time in smaller increments instead of cramming that night before. And pick an intentional study location that works best for you for being the most efficient and focused. And then how. So set some SMART goals. What do you actually want to accomplish during this study session? And then to be intense and intentional with your study sessions. So maybe 30, 45, or 50-minute increments instead of like multiple hours long and you start to like lose focus and fall asleep. So, and interact with the material using active recall strategies that will keep you more engaged with your material. And then also just relax, take breaks. I know one of you said that you take breaks during your study sessions, which is awesome. We need those brain breaks. So get a snack, take a walk, get some fresh air, play like a short game. Yeah. Okay. And then step 5, so assess yourself. Assess whether these strategies that you've been using are effective. Is there something you can do better, or what is working that you want to continue? So ask yourself, like, am I achieving my SMART goals that I set? Do I actually understand the material enough to teach it to others? And what is my previous performance like on exams and quizzes? And then should I make any changes to my study strategies? And then also question, are there any strategies that I haven't used yet that might actually work?
Great. Yeah. So that's an overview of the study cycle, the 5 important steps. So we'll go more into depth about some of those steps and some of the more details, like when, where, and how to study. But assessing is really important too, because it's kind of reflecting on your performance and determining whether or not the strategies that you've used have actually helped you understand the material better. And if not, revisiting your plan and making some adjustments so that you can more effectively study. Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is study preparation. So this is all about kind of how do you get yourself ready for studying, how do you create an ideal study environment, a plan, as well as set goals for yourself. As a student, you're going to spend lots of time studying. And so it's really important that the environment in which you study is both comfortable and productive. And there are a few considerations for when thinking about your study environment and making it both comfortable and productive. Again, this is another area where everyone has different preferences. And so identifying your personal things that distract you from studying and minimizing them will really help you to focus and enable you to study better. So some considerations to think about your environment. The actual space itself, is it tidy? Is it organized? Is the size and location good? There are some people who need a space to be organized and in order for their brains to work like that. I know a few people like that. Whereas for me, the tidiness of a space is not so important. So think about that. Noise is another major consideration because everyone's preferences here vary widely. Again, my preference is that I like to have some noise. In fact, I need some noise in order to concentrate, but it can't be the wrong kind. I don't need loud music with a bunch of lyrics. I just need some noise to fill the space so that it's not completely silent. Think about your electronics. You obviously don't want to have things that will distract you around. So whether that is silencing your cell phone, turning off the TV, or making sure that there are no screens around you that can distract you can be important. Lighting is another thing to consider, as well as climate and comfort. So is my space too hot, too cold? Is this chair extremely uncomfortable? Am I not going to be able to sit here for 5 hours? All of those things you want to consider, as well as other people in your space. So you want to make sure as well that you're only allowing people into your space who are going to either help you study or help you be more productive. And then some other things to think about just to enhance your environment are things that inspire you, such as quotes, photos, posters, or plants, or even putting your goals up so that you can visually see them. Considering scent, candles, incense, and then hunger and thirst. We don't want to, again, be distracted from studying from our own hunger and thirst. So think about having water and maybe a snack with you while you're working. So if you want to, in the chat box, maybe you can describe what your ideal study environment might look like, taking these things into consideration. All right. So the next thing that we want to think about is creating a study plan. So not only do you want to think about where and when you're going to study, but also how am I going to study and how long am I going to study? So you can accomplish all of those things by creating a study plan. So some steps you can take to create an effective study plan are to first to break down the material that you need to study into manageable chunks or groups. So you can think about things like chapters, modules, sections, or even weeks if that's how your class is broken down. Whatever makes the most sense for your course. And then you can decide how long you would like to spend studying each chunk or group. So for just an example, you might decide I want to study 2 hours per 4 groups that are going to appear on my next exam. You'll also want to take into account what study materials or tools you're going to use in order to study. Is that going to be an incomplete outline, a practice test, flashcards, or other materials like that? And then a really important step is to write down what your plan is and stick to it. Because once you can develop this sort of habit of planning, scheduling your study time and sticking to your plans, it will slowly become a habit for you and it'll be a lot less difficult to do moving forward. And so I will also have Maddie put our 5-day study plan template into the chat, just in case you need something to refer to while developing your study plan. And then it looks like we have a response in the chat box about study environment. So Patrice wrote, I look for a hole in the wall cafes in whatever city I'm in or in the hotel rooms that I'm staying. Great. So you're able to find ideal study locations wherever you are, which is a great thing. Okay. So moving on, once you've created a study plan that incorporates distributed practice, which we'll talk about, it's beneficial to create some SMART goals for your study session. SMART goals, for those of you who are not aware, provide parameters for your goals that ultimately help to make them more achievable. The goals can also help narrow down what you want to study. They can focus your study time, help you stay accountable, and then determine as well if you're studying effectively. So SMART is an acronym, and it stands for specific, as in what specifically do I want to accomplish during my study session? Measurable, how will I know that I've accomplished the goal? Actionable, what actions do I need to take? Realistic, reflecting on the goal you've set and determining if this is a realistic goal given the amount of time. And then speaking of time, T is for timely, which is what is the time frame for accomplishing this goal? So I'm going to provide you with a few examples of some SMART goals for studying. So by the end of this session, which we have determined is 45 minutes, so that's the T in SMART goals, I will be able to compare and contrast the 7 main perspectives in psychology. So that's a good example of a SMART goal because, one, it sets a time frame. It tells us exactly or specifically what we want to be able to understand at the end of that time. It's measurable because at the end of that 45 minutes, if I can name or if I can compare and contrast those 7 perspectives, then I know I've accomplished the goal. And similarly, this is a pretty realistic goal as well, just on what we know about this topic and the amount of time it takes to kind of memorize. Another example is, by the end of this study session, I will be able to solve 10 different practice problems on linear equations and inequalities. So this is more for like a problem-solving type of course, where you may want to set a number of practice problems and an amount of time that you want to accomplish those in. And for this specific goal, we may want to add a time limit as well, like the one above, which had 45 minutes, just so we know whether or not it's realistic. Whether it's realistic or not. Depending on the math course, solving 10 problems in 45 minutes might be too much time, not enough time, or just the right amount of time. Okay, another really excellent tool for studying is to make flashcards and note cards. So we also want to provide some tips on creating flashcards because not all flashcards are created equally. So just some reminders about flashcards. They can be handwritten or digital, again, depending on your preference. You can mix pictures with words if you want. That's a helpful strategy because pictures are often more easily remembered with words, especially when we work on association. So for instance, if I had a term on a side of a card, I might draw a picture of something that relates to it on the other side that can help trigger my memory for that term. You could also include mnemonic devices, which are really helpful. Mnemonic devices are just little tricks and tips to help us memorize specific things. So you may have heard of the term PEMDAS for the order of operations in mathematics. And so PEMDAS is an acronym that stands for parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And that is the order in which you would complete math problems according to the order of operations. Another important tip for note cards, be sure you only include one fact per note card. The reason for that is you want to be able to show that you're studying things separately and that you've been able to solidify your understanding of each of the facts that you need to remember for your test. So if you have a complicated concept that has multiple questions or components to it, you may want to include each component on a separate note card. It's also really important when you study note cards to say your answers out loud before you flip them over and look at the answer. We'll get to why a little bit later. And then finally, you also want to make sure that you study your flashcards in both directions because that helps build bidirectional neural pathways. So, you know, if you've only studied note cards one way, you may only be able to name a definition if you see the term and vice versa. So you want to make sure you're doing both so that if you are provided a definition, you can provide the term, or if you're provided the term, you can provide the definition. So that's how that works. Okay, some other tools that you can create to help with your study sessions are practice tests. Practice tests are really useful because when you create your own practice tests, you're kind of anticipating what questions will show up and then practicing answering those questions. So that's really a beneficial step to take. So in order to create your own practice tests, you can use things like study guides, the notes that you've taken, the textbook for the class, instructor slides if you have access to those, as well as recorded lectures. So using all of those materials to develop questions that could be asked on the exam. And some tips for that are to make the questions as challenging as possible so that you're really testing yourself and ensuring that you'll be able to answer the questions fully on the exam. And then again, we're going to keep saying this, but test yourself and utilize those active recall strategies. So one new kind of thing that has popped up over the past, I would say, year or two is the use of generative AI or things like ChatGPT and other tools like that. And so some students are, I think at this point, are wondering, can I use ChatGPT or generative AI to study? I don't have the answer to that question yet. You know, this is something that people are working on as, you know, generative AI tools develop. But there are some institutions out there who have said that there are ethical ways to use generative AI to study. However, there are also some traps to keep in mind when using AI. We're not going to get into those specifics for this session, but it is something to consider moving forward. And we do have some resources that we can share with you in the chat box if you'd like to learn more about how it can be used for study, as well as some things to avoid when using generative AI to make sure that you're being ethical and you're doing things the right way. Okay, visual tools are also really useful because they help you to organize your information into more concise, more visual things that can help you remember. So again, this is an active recall strategy. Creating the tool is an active recall strategy, as well as utilizing the tool for study. So 3 that we want to mention here: mind mapping on the bottom left, which helps you to visually organize information. I'm a visual person, so when I get really confused by things, sometimes I need to stop and create a mind map or some sort of chart that helps me to understand things. Similarly, you can use Venn diagrams like on the top right, especially if you want to compare and contrast things. This is really helpful. So you do 2 overlapping circles. The middle is what is similar or comparable about the 2 things. And then the things on the outside circles are how they differ. And then timelines are really great too, for putting a lot of information into chronological order, to see things like the change over time, cause and effect, as well as the significance of historical events. So you might be wondering, how do I actually make these things? There are actually some tools and apps that you can use for studying if you don't want to draw all these things out with your hands. So Quizlet is an excellent one for creating and studying digital study materials. It can create flashcards for you. It can create practice quizzes, games, and exams that you can take and utilize as active recall strategies. So that's a really great one. Khan Academy is also another excellent resource that can help you that can provide you with video lessons on hundreds of different topics. And it also includes a lot of extra practice problems and materials that you can refer to. A lot of math students and students in problem solving classes like chemistry, physics, and other courses like that really like Khan Academy. And then Lucidchart. Lucidchart is a diagramming application that allows you to create things that I previously mentioned on my previous slide, like mind maps, charts, timelines, Venn diagrams, and other tools like that. So if you're looking to make things like this, I would definitely recommend utilizing Lucidchart, and I believe it is a free account that you can set up. Oh, someone else mentioned this at the beginning of our session as a tool that they use, the Pomodoro timer. So the Pomodoro timer is a tool that can be implemented into the strategies that we're sharing with you today. So essentially what a Pomodoro timer is you're deciding what task you want to accomplish. You set the timer to a short amount of time, like 25 minutes. You work on that task in a focused way for that entire time. And then when the timer goes off, you take a short 5-minute break to kind of do whatever you need to do to get rejuvenated and refocused on the material. And the point is that this is a cycle. So you're studying for 25 minutes, taking a 5-minute break, studying for 5 minutes, taking a 5-minute break, until you've accomplished the thing that you want to accomplish. You can also use tools such as the focus timer on your smartphone if you want to mute any distractions or ensure that you're focused during those 25 minutes by eliminating other distractions. Okay, and then something we really like to share, this is really important, is that one of the best ways to master something is to teach it. And that's what's reflected in that quote to the right. So, it can also be said that one of the most effective ways to study something is to teach it or explain it to others. So studying with others provides us with that opportunity to teach or explain the material to one another. Very importantly, this needs to be out loud to practice how you formulate responses in your head and then verbalize those things. And we also know that one of the best ways to demonstrate your understanding and test your knowledge is to explain concepts to a friend in a way that they can understand. So if you're able to explain the concept to your friend who isn't even in the class that you're taking, then you have a pretty good understanding of that material, and you could likely explain that on an exam as well. So a little bit more on teaching or explaining to others. Some ways you can accomplish this are creating a peer study group with your friends in the class that you're taking, just recruiting your friends to help, even if they're not in the class that you're taking. Utilizing tutoring is one of the best ways to do this because, good tutors will provide you with the opportunities for you to practice and demonstrate your knowledge. And as well, they have practiced and utilized good strategies themselves, so they can help you identify what strategies might work best for you. And then also, there are strategies that you can use that accomplish this same thing on your own. So, for instance, you can create practice quizzes, tests, and practice answering the questions aloud, as I previously mentioned. You can practice your flashcards verbally. Or, if you're really ambitious, you can pretend to explain the concept to someone else, whether that be in front of a mirror, or whether or not you want to maybe record yourself and revisit that recording to see if you're effectively explaining the content. Okay, and then we have some tutoring resources as well in case you want to take advantage of tutoring. So tutor.com is available to all UH Community College students, and they provide 24/7 tutoring. So even if you need assistance at 2 o'clock in the morning, tutor.com can help. You can access tutor.com via hawaii.edu/tutor, and that's really important. You have to use that link. Don't go to tutor.com because it has to connect to your UH account to provide you access. And then it's very likely that you have excellent tutoring services on your own individual campuses as well. So here at WCC, again, I'm the coordinator of Kapiko services. So we have a writing lab, a math lab, as well as peer embedded tutoring through supplemental instruction. And we also have a TRIO program on our campus. So definitely look into the programs that your specific campus offers and take advantage of those resources. Okay, and then we also want to emphasize throughout all of this studying that you really need to take care of yourself, because taking care of yourself will also help improve your academic performance. So we talked about taking breaks, periodically during your studying, that can help you, redevelop your motivation, as well as helping you to solidify the understanding of the material. Taking breaks can help accomplish that as well. It's also important to do self-care, to do things to de-stress and improve your well-being. So for example, certain things that I like to do is sometimes I will take a break from working to actually go on a run or a jog for cardio. Or I might take a break to do something like breathing or meditation as my self-care. Similarly, sleep is extremely important for mental processing. You won't effectively be able to process things mentally if you're lacking sleep in a significant way. So this is to say, definitely don't pull all-nighters if you can. Use that distributive practice to plan things out ahead of time. And then avoid anything that will be too distracting on your short break. So, don't start a TV show or a movie or something that you can't finish in 5 minutes. Okay, so now moving on to the two effective strategies that we've kind of mentioned throughout the training, or not the, throughout this workshop, distributed practice and active recall. So you might have picked up on what these things are as we've talked about them. But again, to reemphasize this point, one of the biggest mistakes that students make in studying is cramming, because it's less likely that you'll remember the information. Like we mentioned, your brain needs that rest time in between to process. And then cramming can also increase our feelings of stress and anxiety, which can negatively impact our learning. And so instead of cramming and pulling all-nighters, we want to aim for distributed practice, which, as we've said, is chunking your studying into multiple sessions over longer periods of time. So instead of studying for an exam for 8 hours before your exam, it's better to study for 45 minutes per day for the 10 days leading up to your exam. And this has been supported by research. And what they found is that even when the study time is exactly the same or equal, students who use distributed practice learn and retain more. So it's really helpful to plan out your study sessions, incorporate that distributed practice, and ensure that you're not cramming. And then active recall is something that we've mentioned throughout our presentation today. These are strategies that get you actively engaged with the material that you're studying. So active recall, we like to say, is very different than recognition. Recognition is, oh, I've seen this concept before. I could recognize it on a test if it's in a multiple choice question or a matching question. And so active recall is not the same as recognition. We just wanted to make that point. So what is active recall then? Active recall strategies are more effective and efficient and include things like using note cards, creating and using practice tests, creating those visual tools that we discussed, testing yourself out loud, as well as studying in groups and testing/teaching one another. And then we mentioned creating practice tests, which is a good way to predict and answer exam questions that you think will show up. So active recall is always going to be more powerful than passive recall strategies, but this is not to say that passive recall strategies are not beneficial at all. They just tend to be a little bit less beneficial. However, they might still be important to your study process. So some passive recall strategies include rereading your notes, reading the textbook, rewatching the lecture, highlighting your notes, and just taking additional notes. So none of those are bad, but for effective and efficient study, we want to aim for those active recall strategies. Okay, so I know we've provided a lot of information about the study cycle, your study environment, making plans for studying, and then using distributive practice and active recall to more efficiently and effectively study. So now I want to show you this video to just put all of this information together for you.
Time for school, and it's no surprise that many of us are determined to study smarter instead of longer. But which study tips and tricks actually work scientifically and can help you get those perfect grades? First up, research shows that study sessions are most effective in small, short chunks. Instead of cramming in a 10-hour study session, it's much more effective to spread it out into 20, 30-minute sessions over a few weeks. This is because your brain is better at encoding information into the synapses in short, repeated sessions as opposed to one large one. And this is why even learning different skills, whether it's swimming, tennis, or a singing lesson, often follows this same format. And while cramming and pulling all-nighters may be a ritual, it turns out that this is linked to the lowest grades. After prolonged nocturnal study sessions, reasoning and memory may be negatively affected for up to 4 whole days. Instead, setting up specific times in a day or during the week just to study primes your brain by creating a routine, and over time, studying actually becomes easier as your brain is trained to learn in those moments. And while many of us spend hours passively rereading our notes or highlighting a textbook, studies have shown this to be ineffective. It doesn't improve your understanding of topics, nor does it link key concepts together. It can even be detrimental as it draws your attention to less important information. Flashcards, on the other hand, are proven to be excellent memory reinforcement tools, whether during your scheduled study times or during off times like a bus ride home. It also helps to have a specific goal for each study session. Instead of aimlessly studying, pick one aspect you'll focus on, whether it's balancing chemical equations or learning how to conjugate French verbs. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough. In studies where individuals were asked to learn a passage and then half were told that they would be tested on the material while the other half were told they would have to teach it to other students, participants expecting to teach it did much better at understanding the main points. When you're expecting to teach, your brain organizes the information in a more logical, coherent structure. Of course, practice, practice, practice. Not only do practice tests put your brain in the environment, but even if you make mistakes, they help identify gaps in your knowledge. Practice tests have also been shown to increase confidence, thereby leading to better performance. So, where should you be studying? research shows that having a designated sacred spot for study that's well equipped with every tool you might need is best. Just like setting times, this primes your brain for studying. Have an awesome study playlist? Not so fast. While some studies have shown that certain types of classical music can help improve concentration, a recent study has shown that learning with rhythmic background noise can be detrimental to focus, and those not using music fared much better. And if you haven't already, put away your phone. This is a no-brainer, but your texts and social media notifications severely decrease concentration. Of course, exams can be extremely stressful, so if you want some tips on how to deal with exam anxiety, check out our ASAP Thought video, which breaks down some tips for that. Link in the description.
All right, thanks for watching that video. Hopefully that provided kind of a useful summary of most of the topics that we've been covering today. But if you need some further summary, here's a slide that does that for you. So again, my overarching message here was that effective studying equals the study cycle plus good study prep plus effective studying strategies. So the study cycle, make sure that you follow that 5-step cycle and that you're maintaining good habits and that you're making your studying as effective and efficient as possible. Study prep includes creating a study plan that includes dates, times, and goals, your environment to prevent distractions, and creating your actual study materials using those active recall strategies. So study guides, note cards, practice tests. And then finally, applying your study prep to your effective studying strategies. So making sure that you're distributing your practice, spacing it instead of cramming, and that you're using your study tools to practice active recall strategies by testing yourself aloud or finding all those opportunities to explain and teach to others. Okay, so hopefully that was a useful overview of studying and effective study strategies. The last thing we want to do is ask you a question. So after learning all of this material, how are you going to study differently moving forward? So again, if you could scan that QR code or visit us at slido.com and enter that number. And really quickly, if you can just provide us with how you might study differently moving forward so we can understand how to improve our presentations in the future. So what you're seeing on the screen is what previous students have said. So if you want to add your mana'o here, that would be really useful for us. And then while you're typing, to just name some of the things that other students have indicated here. They mentioned organizing their notes after class, thinking about their study environment and implementing self-care, reviewing flashcards in both directions, moving your phone away from you when you're studying, creating practice tests and utilizing the Pomodoro timer. And then, yeah, breakdown of a little bit of material each day. That's excellent. Incorporating more sleep is really important. So those are some of the things that have been mentioned. But think about how you might change your study techniques or strategies moving forward. Better sleep hygiene is really important. Probably, as well as trying Cornell notes. Excellent. Yeah, sleep hygiene is really important. So that includes like the temperature of the room, the lighting in the room, the time at which you go to bed, and just your general environment when you're sleeping. It's really important. Repeating flashcard material, going both ways is genius. Thank you. Yeah, so definitely try and incorporate that strategy. Okay, thanks for participating in our poll. You can continue typing if you're still working on that. But I do want to kind of wrap us up here. And thank everyone for listening today and for your participation. We hope this was beneficial to you and that you can incorporate some of these strategies into your study. But we want to remind you that you can RSVP for future Success Connection workshops at the link on my screen, and that we'll put in the chat box too. And then finally, And really importantly, we would love to know your feedback from today's session. So please scan the QR code on our screen. We'll also put the link to this form in the chat. Please give us some feedback so we can help improve our workshops in the future and make them more beneficial to you students. As well, if you're receiving extra credit for being here today, this form is where you indicate to us your instructor and what class that you're in so that we can contact them and let them know that you've attended today. All right. So with that, I just want to again say mahalo. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for listening. And I can answer any questions if anyone wants to unmute or put things into the chat box. But if not, have a great rest of your day. And thanks for joining us at today's Success Connection workshop. Mahalo, everyone.